She had $19, a thin jacket, and a choice that would change everything. When 17-year-old Emma found a dying woman in the snow, she could have walked away. She could have saved herself. Instead, she took off her only jacket, wrapped a stranger in her dead grandmother's blanket, the last thing she owned in this world, and held her through 8 hours of deadly cold. By morning, they were both dying. But what happened next? Nobody could have predicted it. This is the true story of one freezing December night that saved 2 lives, created a family from strangers, and proved that sometimes the person you save ends up saving you right back. Stay with me, because by the end of this story, you'll never look at kindness the same way again. Welcome to Penthouse Stories with Grandpa. While you are here, please hit the subscribe button and share your thoughts on the story, as well as where you are watching from. Let me tell you about a night that proves something beautiful. A night that shows us how one small act of kindness can change not just one life, but many lives forever. This story takes place in Boston, Massachusetts. Picture a winter night so cold that your breath freezes in the air. The kind of night when everyone rushes home, locks their doors, and thanks God they have somewhere warm to be. But not everyone has that blessing, does it? Her name was Emma Rodriguez. She was only 17 years old. Just 17. Think about that for a moment. At an age when most teenagers are worried about school dances and what college to attend, Emma was worried about where she would sleep that night. Emma had been on her own since she was 14. That's when her grandmother passed away from a heart attack. Her grandmother was the only family she had left in this world. For 3 years after that, Emma moved from one shelter to another. Sometimes she slept in library bathrooms. Sometimes on bus benches. Sometimes she just walked all night to stay safe. On this particular December night, Emma had exactly $19 in her pocket. That was it. Everything she owned in the world. The youth shelter had asked her to leave that morning. Not because she did anything wrong, but because she turned 17 and they needed the bed for younger children. That's how the system works when you're poor and alone. You age out. You're on your own. Good luck surviving. So Emma walked through the wealthy neighborhoods of Beacon Hill, trying to stay warm, trying to figure out what to do next. The beautiful brownstone houses stood tall and proud, their windows glowing with golden light. Inside those homes, families were eating dinner together, watching television, being warm and safe. Outside, Emma walked alone in the bitter cold. Her thin coat did almost nothing against the freezing wind. She knew she shouldn't be in this neighborhood. She understood how it looked. A young Latina girl with a backpack, walking slowly past expensive homes. That's the kind of thing that gets the police called. But Emma was just trying to stay warm. Just trying to keep moving. Because if she stopped moving, the cold would win. And then she heard something. A voice. Someone crying, confused and frightened. Every instinct in Emma's body told her to keep walking. Getting involved with other people's problems when you looked like her, when you had no home and no one to protect you, that was dangerous. That was the kind of thing that could land you in jail, or worse. But the crying continued. And despite everything telling her to walk away, Emma found herself moving toward the sound. In the shadows between 2 massive brownstone houses, she found an elderly woman. The woman had white hair falling wild around her face. She was wearing nothing but a thin nightgown and bedroom slippers. She was shaking violently in the December cold, clutching a framed photograph to her chest. Emma called out softly, her voice gentle. "Are you okay? Are you lost?" The old woman turned to look at her. Her eyes were clouded and confused, like she was looking at something far away. "I need to find my daughter," she said, her voice trembling with cold and fear. "Elizabeth. She's waiting for me. I'm so late. I'm so late." Emma's heart sank. She recognized those signs immediately. Her grandmother had been exactly the same way before she died. Dementia. This woman was confused, lost in her own mind. "What's your name?" Emma asked gently, moving closer. "Helen. Helen Chen. And I need to find Elizabeth." "Where is she?" Emma looked around. The street was completely empty. No one to help. This woman was going to freeze to death out here if someone didn't do something. "Do you know where you live, Miss Helen? Can you tell me your address?" Helen's face crumpled like a piece of paper. "I can't remember. Why can't I remember? What's wrong with me?" In that moment, Emma had a choice to make. She could call 911. That would be the smart thing, the safe thing. But Emma had learned not to trust the police. She had learned that when you were a homeless teenager with brown skin, encounters with law enforcement rarely went well. And if the police found her here with a confused elderly white woman who couldn't explain who Emma was or why she was helping, what would they think? Emma couldn't risk it. But she also couldn't leave this woman to die in the cold. "Okay, Miss Helen," Emma said, making her decision in that moment. "Let's figure this out together. Let's walk around and see if anything looks familiar to you." She took off her jacket. Her only jacket. The one thing standing between her and the deadly cold. And she wrapped it around Helen's frail, shaking shoulders. "But you'll be cold," Helen said. For just a moment, clarity broke through the confusion in her eyes. "I'll be okay," Emma lied, trying to smile. "I'm tougher than I look." And so they walked together, slowly, Helen leaning heavily on Emma's arm. They tried gate after gate, house after house, but nothing looked familiar to Helen. She kept talking, her words wandering through time, mixing past and present, calling for people who might not even be alive anymore. The temperature kept dropping. Emma's thin long-sleeved shirt did nothing against the wind that cut through her like a knife. Her body started shaking uncontrollably. After walking for 30 minutes, Helen's legs gave out. "I'm so tired," she whispered. "Can we rest? Please?" And that's where our story really begins. With two strangers, sitting down together in the cold, not knowing if they would survive the night. They were in front of a huge stone brownstone, all dark except for the security lights. There was a small covered area near the gate, sheltered from the worst of the wind. Emma helped Helen sit down, then settled beside her on the cold concrete steps. That's when Emma noticed something. A heating vent near the base of the wall. It was barely giving off any warmth, but it was something. Maybe, just maybe, it would be enough to keep them alive through the night. Emma pulled out her backpack with shaking hands. At the very bottom, underneath everything else, was her grandmother's blanket. It was thin and worn, full of holes. But it smelled like home. It smelled like love. It smelled like everything she had lost. She had sworn to herself that she would never give this blanket away. It was all she had left of her grandmother, of her childhood, of the one person who had truly loved her. But looking at Helen, so frail and confused and cold, Emma knew what she had to do. She wrapped the blanket around both of them and pulled Helen close to her body, trying to share whatever warmth she had left. "What's this?" Helen asked, touching the soft fabric with her trembling fingers. "It was my grandmother's," Emma said quietly. "She died 3 years ago. This blanket is all I have left of her." "Then you shouldn't waste it on me," Helen said. "It's not wasted," Emma said firmly, and she meant it. "My grandma would want me to use it to help someone. She believed in taking care of people, even when you have nothing left to give." And so they sat there, huddled together against the cold, as the temperature dropped lower and lower and the night grew darker. Time moves differently when you're fighting to survive. Every minute feels like an hour. Every hour feels like a lifetime. Emma checked her phone. 7:30. The battery was at 12%. She turned it off to save power, just in case they needed it for an emergency later. The cold was unlike anything Emma had ever experienced. It wasn't just uncomfortable. It was dangerous. The kind of cold that makes your bones ache. The kind of cold that makes your thoughts get fuzzy and confused. The kind of cold that makes you want to close your eyes and sleep, even though you know that sleeping might mean never waking up again. "Tell me about your grandmother," Helen said after a while, her voice weak but curious. So Emma talked. She told Helen about Grandma Maria. About her laugh that could fill a room. About how she sang songs in Spanish while she cooked, even though she couldn't carry a tune. About how she worked 2 jobs to keep them fed and housed, but always made time to help Emma with her homework, to ask about her day, to make her feel loved and important. "She sounds wonderful," Helen said softly. "She was," Emma said, and her voice broke. "She taught me that being poor doesn't mean being unkind. That you can lose everything material and still be rich if you have a good heart." "She was right," Helen said. Then her eyes drifted away, losing focus. "Is Elizabeth coming? She's supposed to pick me up." "She'll be here soon," Emma lied, even though she was beginning to suspect that Elizabeth might be gone, just like Grandma Maria was gone. The hours crawled by so slowly. 8 o'clock. 9 o'clock. 10 o'clock. Emma talked continuously, telling Helen stories, asking her questions, anything to keep her awake and alert. Because if Helen fell asleep in this cold, she might never wake up. Helen drifted in and out of clarity. Sometimes she called Emma Elizabeth. Sometimes she asked for her husband. Sometimes she was clear and present in the moment. During one clear moment around 11 o'clock, Helen looked at Emma with sharp, focused eyes. You're freezing, she said, her voice suddenly strong with concern. You're going to die out here trying to save me. No, I'm not, Emma said, though her body had stopped shivering, which she knew was a very bad sign. We're going to make it through this night. Both of us. Why are you doing this? Helen asked. You don't even know me. You could leave right now. You could save yourself. Emma thought about that question. She thought about Grandma Maria's words. She thought about the promise she had made at her grandmother's hospital bed, to always be kind, to always help when she could. Because someone needed help, Emma said simply. And I was there. That's reason enough. Helen reached out with a shaking hand and touched Emma's face. Your grandmother raised you right, she whispered. She would be so proud of you. Emma felt tears freeze on her cheeks. By midnight, Emma was losing her fight against hypothermia. Her thoughts scattered and confused. Her vision blurred at the edges. Her body felt heavy and distant, like it belonged to someone else. But she kept her arms wrapped around Helen. She kept the blanket tucked around them both. She kept her body between Helen and the worst of the cold wind. Emma, Helen's voice seemed to come from very far away. Are you still there? Still here, Emma mumbled, forcing the words through numb lips. Not going anywhere. Don't leave me, Helen said, and she sounded scared, like a child lost in the dark. Please don't leave me alone. Never, Emma promised. I'm not leaving you. I promise. Around 2 a.m, Emma stopped being able to feel her hands or feet. Her core temperature had dropped dangerously low. She knew, in the part of her brain that could still think clearly, that she was dying. But Helen was still alive. Still breathing. Still warm against her body. That was enough. That had to be enough. Emma thought about her grandmother. About her smile and her laugh. About the way she used to braid Emma's hair every Sunday morning before church. About the way she made everything feel safe, even when they had almost nothing. She thought about what Grandma Maria had said about staying kind even when the world wasn't kind back to you. I kept my promise, Grandma, Emma whispered into the darkness. I stayed kind right to the very end. Helen stirred against her. Who are you talking to? My grandmother, Emma said. Telling her I love her. Tell mine I love her too, Helen said, her voice dreamy and far away. And my Elizabeth. Tell them all I love them. I will, Emma promised, even though she was pretty sure they were both going to die here. 2 lost souls who had found each other at the end. The snow started falling around 3 a.m. Big, heavy flakes that accumulated quickly on their shoulders and hair, covering them in white like a frozen blanket. Like the world was putting them to sleep. Emma's consciousness faded in and out. One moment, she was aware of the cold and Helen's weight against her. The next moment, she was somewhere warm, somewhere safe. Grandma Maria was there, smiling at her, telling her everything would be okay. Just a little longer, Emma told herself when she came back to awareness. Just hold on a little longer. But she didn't know if anyone was coming. Didn't know if anyone would find them. Didn't know if she would wake up again, or if the next time she closed her eyes would be the last time. All she knew was that she wasn't going to let go. She wasn't going to leave Helen alone. She wasn't going to break her promise to stay. At 5:47 in the morning, as the first hint of dawn touched the sky, headlights swept across the steps where they Saturday. Emma tried to open her eyes, but they felt frozen shut. She heard a car door slam. She heard footsteps running. She heard someone screaming. Mom! Oh my God, Mom! Emma forced her eyes open, just barely. A woman was running toward them. Tall, elegant, wearing an expensive coat. Her face was twisted with horror and fear and relief all at once. This must be Elizabeth. Helen's daughter. Emma tried to speak, tried to explain, but her voice wouldn't work. Her lips were too frozen. Her body too cold. She gathered every bit of strength she had left and pushed the words out. She was lost, Emma whispered. I couldn't leave her. And then everything went dark. When Emma woke up, she was warm. Really, truly warm. It was a warmth that went deep into her bones. A warmth that almost hurt after being so cold for so long. She was in a hospital bed. Heavy blankets were piled on top of her, and 4 dripped slowly into her arm. Monitors beeped steadily beside her, tracking her heartbeat, her breathing, her return to life. For a moment, Emma panicked. Hospitals meant bills she couldn't pay. Hospitals meant questions she couldn't answer. Hospitals meant social workers and police and people who would want to know why a 17-year-old girl was homeless. But then a nurse appeared. A woman with kind eyes and gentle hands. Welcome back, sweetheart, she said softly. You gave us quite a scare. Helen, Emma croaked, her throat raw and painful. The old woman. Is she? Mrs. Chen is fine, the nurse said, smiling warmly. Mild hypothermia, but she's going to be perfectly okay. Thanks to you. Her eyes filled with tears. You saved her life, honey. You almost died doing it, but you saved her life. Emma felt something release in her chest. Something tight and painful that had been there all night. Helen was alive. Helen was okay. That was all that mattered. The door opened and a woman walked in. The same woman from the steps. Helen's daughter, Elizabeth. Up close, she looked to be in her late 40s. She had kind eyes that were red from crying. Behind her stood 2 police officers. Emma's stomach tightened with fear. Here it came. The questions. The suspicion. The assumption that she must have done something wrong. But the female officer stepped forward with an expression that was surprisingly kind and gentle. I'm Detective Sarah Williams, she said. This is Officer James Park. We just need to understand what happened last night. You're not in trouble, sweetheart. We just need to know. So Emma told them everything. Finding Helen in the alley. Trying to help her find home. Giving her the jacket and the blanket. Sitting with her through the long, cold night. You gave her your only jacket? Elizabeth asked quietly, her voice shaking. In 20-degree weather. Yes, Emma said. She needed it more than me. And this blanket? Elizabeth said, holding up Grandma Maria's worn blanket. It was clean now, folded neatly. The hospital staff said you told them it was all you had left of your grandmother. Emma nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. Elizabeth's eyes filled with tears. Why? Why would you give up something so precious for a complete stranger? Emma looked at her directly. Because she needed someone, Emma said simply. And I was there. Detective Williams closed her notebook. Miss Chen, the report will show that this young woman saved your mother's life at great risk to her own. That's what I'll be filing. After the officers left, Elizabeth pulled a chair close to the hospital bed and sat down. She looked at Emma for a long moment, like she was trying to understand something impossible. Do you have somewhere to go when they release you? She asked finally. Emma shook her head. No, but I'll figure something out. I always do. No, Elizabeth said firmly. You're coming home with us. Emma blinked, not sure she had heard correctly. You don't have to do that. Really? You don't owe me anything. You saved my mother's life, Elizabeth interrupted, her voice strong but gentle. You gave everything you had for a complete stranger. I have a guest room in my house. It's warm, safe, private. You can stay there for as long as you need to. I can't accept that, Emma whispered, afraid to hope. You don't even know me. Elizabeth smiled sadly. I know enough. I watched the security footage from last night. Every single minute of it. I saw you wrap your arms around my mother to keep her warm. I saw you giving up everything to save her. I saw you dying to save her life. Her voice broke. You're not sleeping on the streets after that. Not while I have the ability to help you. Emma stared at her, tears running down her face. She wanted to believe it. But she had learned not to trust good things. They always ended. My mother has dementia, Elizabeth continued, her voice steady now. It's been getting worse over the past year. I have staff at the house. I have systems in place. But that night, the door alarm malfunctioned. Mom wandered outside while I was away on a business trip in New York. If you hadn't found her. She couldn't finish the sentence. But I did, Emma said softly. Yes, Elizabeth said. You did. And now I'm going to help you the way you helped her. That's how this works. That's what decent people do. 3 days later, Emma was discharged from the hospital. Elizabeth picked her up in a sleek car that probably cost more than Emma had seen in her entire life. They drove to a part of Boston Emma had only seen from bus windows. The wealthy part. The part where people like her weren't supposed to be. The brownstone was massive. Beautiful brick and tall windows that sparkled in the winter sun. As they pulled through the gates, Emma saw the spot where she had spent that terrible night. The alcove where she had wrapped her body around Helen. The steps where she had nearly died. We're putting up a memorial plaque there, Elizabeth said, noticing where Emma was looking. A reminder of what really matters in life. The front door opened and a teenage boy came running out. He looked about 15, with Elizabeth's warm smile and bright, curious eyes. Is this her? He asked excitedly. Is this Emma? Thomas, Elizabeth said, her voice warm with affection. Let her get out of the car first. Emma climbed out, feeling awkward and out of place in her borrowed hospital clothes. You saved Grandma Helen, Thomas said, looking at her with open admiration. You're a hero. I'm not a hero, Emma said uncomfortably. I just did what anyone would do. No, a voice said from the doorway. Helen stood there, leaning on a walker, her eyes clearer than they had been that terrible night. You did what most people wouldn't do. That's exactly what makes you a hero. She shuffled forward slowly, and Emma met her halfway, taking her frail hand gently. Thank you, Helen said, tears streaming down her weathered face. Thank you for staying with me, for not leaving me alone in the cold. I couldn't leave you, Emma said simply. You needed help. Helen patted her cheek with her free hand. You're a good girl. Your grandmother raised you right. Inside, the house was overwhelming. Marble floors and elegant furniture and art on the walls that probably cost more than anything Emma had ever owned in her life. She felt so small, so out of place. I know it's a lot, Elizabeth said, noticing her expression. But this is your home now, for as long as you want it to be. A woman appeared from one of the side rooms. Grace, the housekeeper, with kind eyes and a warm smile that reminded Emma of her grandmother. Let me show you to your room, Grace said. Emma followed her up a beautiful staircase, Thomas trailing behind, talking excitedly about school and his soccer team and his dog named Professor Einstein. Grace opened a door and Emma stepped inside and stopped breathing. The room was huge. There was a Royale bed with a thick comforter, a desk by the window, a bookshelf filled with books, a dresser, a door that led to a private bathroom with a shower and everything. It's too much, Emma whispered. It's yours, Grace said firmly. All of it. After everyone left, Emma sat on the edge of the bed and carefully took out her few possessions. Grandma Maria's photograph. The journal she had been writing in since she was 14. A book of poetry her grandmother had given her. She placed the photo on the nightstand. And for the first time in 3 years, she cried. Really, truly cried. Not from sadness, but from relief. From gratitude. From the overwhelming feeling of finally being safe. The first few weeks were the hardest. Emma kept waiting for it to end. For Elizabeth to realize this was a mistake. For someone to tell her she didn't belong here. She barely touched anything in her room. She made her bed every morning with careful precision. She ate sparingly at meals. She moved through the beautiful house like a ghost, trying not to leave a mark, trying not to take up space. On the 6th day, Elizabeth found her in the library, looking at books but too afraid to take one off the shelf. Emma, Elizabeth said, sitting down across from her. We need to talk. Emma's heart sank. Here it came. The end of the dream. This isn't working, Elizabeth continued. Emma nodded, trying not to cry. I understand. I can pack my things. No, Elizabeth interrupted. That's not what I mean. I mean you being afraid to live here isn't working. You're tiptoeing around like you're going to be kicked out any minute. She stood up and pulled books off the shelf, stacking them on the table in front of Emma. Take these to your room. Read them. These are just books. They are meant to be used, to be enjoyed. Elizabeth sat back down, her expression softer now, more vulnerable. I want you to understand something important, she said. I'm not doing this out of pity or obligation. I'm doing this because you're family now. And this is your home. Really, truly your home. How do I know you won't change your mind? Emma asked, voicing her deepest fear. The fear that had kept her awake every night. Because tomorrow we're meeting with a lawyer to start guardianship paperwork, Elizabeth said. Because I'm enrolling you in school. Because I'm making you legally, officially, permanently part of this family. She leaned forward, her eyes intense and sincere. Emma, I'm not a foster parent who took you in temporarily. I'm someone who wants you here. Who needs you here. You reminded me what truly matters in life. Her voice cracked with emotion. Let me give you what you gave my mother. A real chance at life. After that conversation, everything changed. Emma started taking books to her room. She started eating normal portions at dinner. She laughed at Thomas's silly jokes. She sat with Helen on her bad days, reading to her, keeping her company, just being there. And slowly, beautifully, the house started to feel less like a museum and more like home. 2 weeks after moving in, Elizabeth sat Emma down with a stack of papers and study guides. You're 17, but you left school when you were 14, Elizabeth said. I want to get you a tutor so you can catch up and eventually take your GED test. Once you pass that, We can talk about college. Or vocational school. Or whatever you want to do with your life. Emma stared at the study materials and college brochures spread across the table. I don't know if I'm smart enough anymore. It's been 3 years. Then you'll relearn, Elizabeth said simply. You survived 3 years on the streets. If you can do that, you can pass any test they throw at you. The tutor arrived the next week. Mrs. Anderson was a retired teacher with endless patience and the kindest eyes Emma had ever seen. Let's see where you are, she said during their first session. Emma struggled through the practice test, feeling stupid with every question she couldn't answer. When they scored it, she had barely passed 2 of the 4 sections. It's okay, Mrs. Anderson said gently. This is just the starting point. We'll work together. And they did work. Every morning at 6 o'clock, before Elizabeth left for her job and Thomas left for school, Emma sat at the kitchen table with her books. Math that made her head hurt. Science she had never learned. History she had forgotten. Writing that felt impossible. Some days she wanted to quit. On one of those days, Helen found her in the library, surrounded by failed practice tests, crying with frustration. You look troubled, young lady, Helen said. She was having one of her rare clear moments. I'm not smart enough, Emma said. I'm going to fail and disappoint everyone. Helen took her hand in both of hers. My late husband used to say that courage isn't about not being afraid. It's about being terrified and doing it anyway. She squeezed Emma's hand. You've been courageous your whole life, dear. This test is just one more thing you'll be brave enough to face. The GED test was scheduled for a Monday in April. Emma woke up sick with nerves. Elizabeth drove her to the testing center, and before she got out of the car, Elizabeth put a hand on her shoulder. Whatever happens today, I'm proud of you, Elizabeth said. That's success, regardless of what some test says. The test took 4.5 hours. Some questions Emma knew immediately. Others she worked through carefully. Some she had to guess on. Results would come in 6 weeks. 6 weeks of waiting. 6 weeks of waking up at 3 in the morning in a cold sweat, worried she had failed. But during those 6 weeks, something else was happening. Elizabeth started coming home earlier from work. She had dinner with them every night. She played board games with Thomas. She sat with Helen, talking about old memories. She was building a life, not just a career. One evening, Elizabeth found Emma in the library reading. I hired a new operations manager today, Elizabeth said. Someone I trust to handle the day-to-day business operations. Why? Emma asked, surprised. Because that night when you gave everything you had to save my mother, you showed me what I had lost, Elizabeth said. I had been so busy building success that I forgot to build a life. You reminded me what matters. On a Thursday in May, the envelope came. Emma stood in the kitchen, staring at it. Inside was either her GED certificate or a failure notice. Her entire future in one envelope. Thomas appeared at her elbow. Want me to open it? No, Emma said. I'm really scared. You told Grandma Helen everything would be okay that night, Thomas said. You promised. And you kept that promise. Emma smiled despite her fear. She tore open the envelope with shaking hands. She had passed. Scored in the 89th percentile overall. I did it, Emma whispered. I actually did it. You did it. Thomas screamed, jumping up and down. Elizabeth came running from her office. What happened? Is everything okay? Nothing's wrong, Emma said, tears streaming down her face. Everything's right. I passed. I'm going to college. Elizabeth pulled her into a tight hug. And Emma realized it was the first time she had been hugged by a mother figure since Grandma Maria died. That night, they celebrated with Emma's favorite meal. Helen, having a clear evening, raised her glass of water. To Emma, she said, her voice strong and clear, who reminds us what it means to be brave and kind and truly human. And Emma, looking around the table at these people who had become her family, felt something she hadn't felt in years. Pure joy. 3 years later, Emma stood in front of a lecture hall at Boston University, finishing her guest presentation for an introduction to social work class. She was 20 years old now, studying for her bachelor's degree while working part-time at a nonprofit helping homeless youth. People always ask me, Emma said to the 70 students in the room, why I gave everything I had that night to save a stranger. Why I risked my life. And my answer is always the same. Because that's what we're supposed to do. That's what makes us human. She looked out at the diverse group of students, all preparing to enter a profession built on caring for others. It's not about grand gestures or heroic moments, Emma continued. It's about small choices made in critical moments. To stay or walk away. To help or ignore. To see people or look through them like they are invisible. After the lecture, a young woman approached. She was thin, weary, with eyes that held too much pain and fear. I need help, she said quietly. I aged out of foster care last month. I'm trying to stay in school, but I've been sleeping in my car for 2 weeks. Emma put a gentle hand on her shoulder. Hey, it's okay. We're going to figure this out together. Have you eaten today? The student shook her head, tears filling her eyes. Come on, Emma said with a warm smile. Let's get you some food, and then we'll talk about housing and resources and getting you the help you need. Sound good? As they walked across campus together, Emma thought about that cold December night 3 years ago. About Helen and Elizabeth and Thomas. About the family she had found. About the life she had built from one impossible choice. Why are you helping me? The student asked. You don't even know me. Emma smiled, remembering asking Elizabeth the same question. Because my grandmother once told me that you're never poor if you still have kindness in your heart, Emma said. And because nobody should have to feel invisible. Nobody should have to face the cold alone. I've felt invisible for so long, the student whispered. I know, Emma said. I've been exactly where you are. But not anymore. We've got you now. You're not alone. That evening, Emma drove home through the Boston streets. Thomas was there, home from his first semester at college. Helen was sitting in her favorite chair by the window, having one of her increasingly rare clear days. Elizabeth was in the kitchen cooking dinner, something she had learned to love doing for her family. How was the presentation? Elizabeth asked. Good, Emma said. Helped a student after. She reminds me of me. They all remind you of you, Thomas said with a knowing smile. That's why you're so good at this work. After dinner, Emma walked out to the front steps. To the spot where it had all happened. A small memorial plaque had been installed there, just as Elizabeth had promised. In memory of the night that saved us all. Home is where someone waits for you. Family is who stays. Emma touched the plaque, as she always did when she needed to remember where she came from. Still talking to them. Thomas's voice came from behind her. Emma turned and smiled. Always. Thomas came to stand beside her. You know what I realized? That night saved all of us. Grandma Helen, obviously. But also Mom. It reminded her what mattered in life. And me, it gave me a sister and showed me what real courage looks like. And you, it gave you everything you deserved. We saved each other, Emma said softly. That's what family does. Inside, Elizabeth watched them through the window, thinking about her mother, thinking about the strange miracle of that December night, thinking about how sometimes the people we save end up saving us right back. Last month, Elizabeth had done something she had been thinking about for a long time. She had started a foundation. The Helen Chen Foundation for Youth Empowerment. It would provide housing, education, job training, and support for young people aging out of foster care or experiencing homelessness. And she had asked Emma to help run it. Your perspective, your lived experience, it's invaluable, Elizabeth had said. These kids need someone who understands. Someone who's been there. So now, Emma spent her days studying social work and her evenings volunteering at the Foundation's first shelter. She worked with teenagers who had been forgotten by the system. Kids who had learned to be invisible. Young people who just needed someone to see them, to believe in them, to stay. And with each one, Emma brought her own experience, her own understanding, her own refusal to walk away when someone needed help. Listen to me carefully now, because this is important. Every single day, you have a choice. When you see someone struggling, someone in pain, someone who has been made invisible by this world, you can walk away or you can stay. You can protect yourself or you can reach out. Emma was just 17 years old with nothing to her name but a thin jacket and a worn blanket. But she chose kindness. She chose to stay. And that one choice changed everything. What choice will you make? One evening, not long ago, Emma was working late at the Foundation's shelter when a new girl arrived. Her name was Riley. She was 17, just like Emma had been that night. She had the same scared eyes, the same defensive posture, the same way of trying to be invisible. First time here? Emma asked gently. Riley nodded, not making eye contact. I'm Emma. Want some food? We've got lasagna tonight. Real food. The good stuff. As Riley ate hungrily, Emma sat across from her. She didn't push. She didn't pry. She just sat there, present and patient. Finally, Riley looked up. "Why are you being nice to me?" "Because I was you," Emma said simply. "I was homeless too. I know how hard it is. But you don't have to do this alone anymore." Riley's eyes widened. "You were homeless. But you seem so, together." Emma smiled. "I had help. Someone gave me a chance when I had nothing. Now I want to do the same for you." "What happened to you?" Riley asked. "How did you get out?" So Emma told her. Not the sanitized version that appeared in newspaper articles, but the real version. The fear, the cold, the impossible choice to help someone even when it cost everything. "Sometimes," Emma said softly, "all it takes is one person being willing to stay. One person refusing to walk away. One person choosing kindness even when it's hard." Riley's eyes filled with tears. "Can I stay here tonight?" "Absolutely," Emma said. "And tomorrow we'll talk about next steps. About school and housing and what you want for your future. You don't have to figure it all out tonight. You just need to be safe tonight. And you are. I promise." That night, as Emma drove home through the Boston streets, she thought about all the lives that had changed because of one impossible night 3 years ago. Helen, who had lived her final years surrounded by love and family, passing away peacefully just 6 months ago with everyone who loved her by her side. Elizabeth, who had learned to prioritize family over work, who had built something meaningful with the foundation, who had become the mother Emma never thought she'd have. Thomas, who had gained a sister, who volunteered at the shelter every weekend, who wanted to become a social worker himself. Riley and dozens of other kids who were finding hope at the foundation, who were learning they didn't have to be invisible anymore. And herself, Emma Rodriguez, who had gone from homeless and invisible to essential and seen. From having no family to having a family that chose her. From surviving to truly living. The snow started falling as she drove. Gentle this time. Beautiful, not dangerous. Emma pulled up to the brownstone, to the home where someone was always waiting, where family meant the people who chose to stay. She got out of the car and walked to the memorial plaque. She touched it gently, as she did every night. "Thank you, Grandma Maria," she whispered into the cold night air, "for teaching me that kindness changes everything. For showing me that being poor doesn't mean being unkind. I kept your lessons alive. I hope I made you proud." The front door opened and warm light spilled out onto the steps. "Emma!" Thomas called out. "Come on, it's freezing out there. Dinner's ready." Emma smiled and turned toward the light, toward the warmth, toward the home she had built from one impossible choice on one impossible night. The choice to stay. The choice to be kind. The choice to see someone who needed help and refused to walk away. Inside, the lights were golden and welcoming. Elizabeth was setting the table. Thomas was pouring water into glasses. The house smelled like home-cooked food and safety and love. "There you are," Elizabeth said, smiling as Emma walked in. "We were waiting for you. How was your day?" "Good," Emma said, hanging up her coat. "Really good. Helped a new girl at the shelter. She reminds me of who I used to be." "They all do," Elizabeth said warmly. "That's your gift, Emma. You see them. You make them feel visible." "Because someone once did that for me," Emma said softly. Elizabeth walked over and hugged her tight. "And we're so grateful you let us. You changed our lives, Emma. Never forget that." As they sat down to dinner together, Emma looked around the table and felt overwhelming gratitude. Not just for the food or the warm house or the comfortable bed waiting upstairs, but for this. For family. For belonging. For being seen and loved and valued. For the miracle of that one cold night that had seemed like the end but turned out to be the beginning of everything good in her life. Before we end this story, I want you to think about something important. Really think about it. Emma was nobody special. She wasn't rich. She wasn't powerful. She didn't have connections or resources or any kind of safety net. She was just a 17-year-old girl with $19 and a worn-out blanket. But she had something more valuable than any of that. She had kindness. She had courage. She had the ability to see another human being in pain and refuse to walk away. And that changed everything. Not just for Helen, who would have died in the cold without Emma's help. Not just for Elizabeth and Thomas, who learned what really mattered in life. But for Emma herself, who found family and home and purpose because she chose to stay when she could have walked away. Here's the truth that this story teaches us. You don't have to be rich to be kind. You don't have to have everything figured out in your own life to help someone else. You don't have to be perfect to make a difference. You just have to be willing. Willing to see. willing to stay, willing to give what you can, even when it costs you everything. Every single day, you walk past people who are struggling, people who are cold, people who are scared, people who are invisible. And every single day, you have a choice. You can walk away, and no one would blame you. We all have our own problems, our own struggles, our own cold nights to survive. Or you can stay. You can see them. You can offer what you have, even if it seems like nothing. Because here's what Emma's story proves. Sometimes the smallest act of kindness creates ripples that change everything. Sometimes the person you save ends up saving you right back. Sometimes choosing to stay on the coldest night of your life leads you home. So I'm asking you now, what choice will you make? When you see someone who needs help, will you walk away or will you stay? When you have a chance to be kind, even when it costs you something, will you take it? When someone is invisible and alone and scared, will you see them? Emma was just a homeless teenager with nothing to give. But she gave it anyway. And it changed not just 2 lives, but dozens. Maybe hundreds, through the foundation that now bears Helen's name. Maybe thousands, through all the people those kids will go on to help. All because one girl on one cold night made one impossible choice. To stay. To be kind. To wrap her arms around a stranger and refuse to let go, even when it meant she might not survive. That's the power of kindness. That's the power of choosing to stay. That's the power of seeing people who the world has made invisible. You have that power too. Every single one of you watching this has the ability to change someone's life today. Maybe not as dramatically as Emma changed Helen's life, but in ways that matter just as much. A kind word to someone who's struggling. A meal shared with someone who's hungry. A moment of your time given to someone who's lonely. A refusal to walk past someone who needs help. These things matter. These small choices add up. These moments of staying instead of walking away, they create ripples that spread further than you'll ever know. Emma didn't know that freezing night would lead to a home, a family, a college education, a career helping others. She just knew someone needed help and she was there. That was enough. You being there is enough too. So please, take Emma's story with you. Let it remind you that kindness is never wasted. That staying matters. That seeing people matters. That small acts of courage can change everything. And the next time you have a choice between walking away and staying, between protecting yourself and reaching out, between ignoring someone in pain and offering help, choose to stay. Choose kindness. Choose to be the person who refuses to let someone freeze alone in the dark. Because you never know. That one choice, that one moment, that one act of impossible kindness might just change everything. Not just for them, but for you too. Thank you for listening to this story. Thank you for staying until the end. And thank you for being the kind of person who believes that kindness still matters in this world. Now go out there and prove it. Stay when you could walk away. See people who feel invisible. Be kind, even when it's hard. Be like Emma. Be the light in someone's cold, dark night. Because that's how we change the world. One impossible choice at a time. One act of kindness at a time. One moment of staying instead of walking away. That's how we save each other. And sometimes, that's how we save ourselves too.